it's Amy. Welcome to Too Blessed. I don't really know how to start this video. I have been thinking about it for a while, and I've really been wanting to do it, and I just don't know what to say, so I'm just gonna kind of jump in, I think. I did share the story in a blog post, actually 2 blog posts, shortly after it happened, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description box if you're interested in reading anything on my blog. I don't have a lot of posts on there, but the miscarriage was a big one that I wrote about. So if you want a lot more details as far as what happened, that information is in the blog post. For this video, I just want to try to keep it kind of simple. I'm just going to give you the basics. There's some parts of the story that are just too personal that I will not share. So, you know, I don't know, as you hear the story, you may think there's information missing, but that is intentional because there's some parts that I don't want to share with everyone. So just, you know, just so you're aware of that, if there's a question of you feel like something was left out or missing, that's probably why. So just a little background on us. If you don't know us, I came from a large family. There were 8 children in our family, and I was the oldest girl. I have one brother that's older than me, but I'm the oldest girl. And there's a bit of an age gap between after my mom and dad had my brother and they had me. Then there was a gap of a few years before they had the next one. And so I'm a bit older than my younger brothers and sisters. And so I remember when they were born. I remember helping take care of them. I remember sometimes not wanting to help take care of them. Looking back, I'm so glad that I have all the brothers and sisters that I have. They are my best friends, other than my husband. You know, we're very close as adults. I feel like, especially the sisters, I feel like we're really close, and we can all pretty much talk to each other about anything. And I really can't imagine what it would be like to grow up as an only child, or maybe just one of like 1 or 2 children, and not have that bond of having my sisters. So as I got older, I started to realize that was what I wanted for my family someday. And I always used to say that I wanted to have 12 children. And when my husband and I first met, and, you know, we were talking and getting to know each other, that was one of the questions that came up that we kind of asked each other is, well, how do you feel about children? How many children do you want to have? And I told him that I wanted to have 12, but I wanted them all to be girls. Now, my husband, he came from a family of 3 boys. And so, but he also wanted to have a large family. And so our little running joke was that I wanted to have 12 girls and he wanted to have 10 boys. And so, you know, I would say, does that mean we're going to end up with 22 children? I don't know. But that was always what both of us wanted, was to have a large family. And now we didn't meet until we were older. We were in our 30s before we met and got married. So we had a little bit of a later start, you know, than some people. We didn't start our family when we were 20. So honestly, going in, we didn't know if we would get pregnant right away. We didn't know if it would take a while. We didn't know. I had always had irregular cycles, and so I kind of had this feeling that perhaps we wouldn't get pregnant, at least not right away. And so you know, once we got married, we just kind of waited to see what would happen. So we got married in June, and a couple months went by, and I believe it was in August. And I really wish I had written down the date, because I'm trying not to be graphic or anything, but basically I knew when I became pregnant, I knew that I was. I absolutely 100% for sure knew that I was pregnant that day. And, you know, I knew I had to wait a while, you know, just because I thought I was, didn't mean a pregnancy test was going to show it. So I knew that I had to wait. And so we waited. I really don't remember how long we actually waited to start testing. But I also started getting pretty sick, pretty bad morning sickness. And so, like, my body was showing all of these signs. Like, I had the implantation bleeding a few days later. You know, parts of my body were swelling up, and I absolutely knew that I was. And I remember then we went ahead and got a pregnancy test, and we took it, and it was negative. And it didn't bother me at first, because I just thought, well, it's too early. But I just knew I was pregnant. So we kind of became obsessed, and we kept buying different pregnancy tests and trying them again, and wait a few days and try another one. And we couldn't get that positive test, but I was so sure that I was. And so I think it finally ended up being maybe sometime in October before we finally got a positive. And what had happened was I ran out of pregnancy tests, and one night after work, my husband went to the store and he got some more, and he wanted me to take it that night. And I said, well, it's better to do it in the morning, you know, when you first wake up in the morning. And so he was like, okay. He was a little disappointed, but so we went to bed, and I remember that I probably didn't really sleep that night. And I woke up really early. He usually gets up about 6 to go to work. And I think I woke up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, something like that. And I kind of looked over, and he was asleep, and I thought, I'm going to go and do that test, and I'm not going to tell him. Because in my mind, I had this all built up that I was going to get a positive test, and then I could do something to surprise him. So I kind of snuck in the bathroom, and I did the test, and sure enough, it was positive. And it was one of those, like, there was no doubt. You know, you were supposed to wait 2 minutes, and it didn't even take 2 seconds, and that line was there that saying that I was pregnant. And so I just, you know, I was so excited, but I just tried to be really quiet, and I went back into the bedroom, and I got back into bed. And it was funny, because I got back in bed, and I turned the light out, and I laid my head down, and I was like, okay, I made it. I didn't wake him up. And then just, you know, everything was quiet, and then all of a sudden I heard his voice, and he said, was it positive? And I said, what are you doing? I said, I wanted to surprise you. But I mean, it was a sweet moment, because we were both just so excited. And, you know, so we laughed, and we talked, and we hugged, and we looked at the test, and it was one of the happiest days of my life. We did eventually make it to the appointment with the specialist, and they They did a lot of tests and things like that, gave us a lot of information. They were able to give me some prenatal vitamins, which I'd already been taking some, but they had some special ones that had, I think, ginger in, and they were supposed to help with the morning sickness. So I got some samples of those. And then on that visit, they did the first ultrasound. And I'm only crying right now because it was so amazing. It was just, you know, when they started and they kind of, you know, they kind of get ready and they get to a place where they've got a good picture of the baby. And then they turn it on so that you can hear the baby's heartbeat. And I'll never, as long as I live, I'll never forget that sound. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I cried that day too. Just, it finally made it feel so real, you know. I knew I was pregnant, but hearing that heartbeat just really made it sink in and really made, like, there's really a baby in there. So, and I think my husband might have cried that day too. He might be upset with me for saying that, but I think we looked at each other and I think we both had tears in our eyes, and it was so amazing. And of course, you know, we got to see the baby and we got to go home with the pictures. And it made everything feel so tangible, you know, to have those pictures that we could see and to hear that heartbeat, the beautiful little heartbeat. And really after that, it was pretty uneventful, except for the fact that I was so sick. And you know, a lot of days it was not just morning sickness, but all day long sickness. Most days I spent in bed, and if I was able to get up, it would usually be like maybe towards the evening. I could kind of crawl out of bed and go lay on the couch or something like that. But it was easier to take that. Like, when I'm sick and I can't get out of bed, I always feel really guilty that I can't get up and I can't do the things I think I'm supposed to do. But in that case, it was a little easier because I would just tell myself, I'm growing a baby and I need to just allow that to happen. Whatever needs to be done, you know, to keep this little one safe is what we need to do. So, you know, we just kind of went on like that for a few weeks. And then we made it to November, and I remember when everything started because during that first year of marriage, my hair is kind of driving me crazy. It's getting in my eyes here. But during our first year of marriage, we celebrated our anniversary every month. So we got married on June 9th, and so the 9th of every month we kind of tried to do something a little special. Now at that time, my husband was working at a different facility than the one he currently works at, and it was farther from home. He was working, I believe he was working 12-hour shifts, plus he had to drive an hour each way, so he was gone for 14 hours every day. And I remember that when we got to November the 9th, I was sick again. I was so sick. I did not get out of bed that day. I just rested. I threw up. I tried to drink something. I threw up. It was just a really miserable day. But my sweet husband, he wanted to try to do something special. Now I should make this statement that at that time we did not know that I had gastroparesis. So just to make that clear. But he decided that on his way home he was going to pick up a pizza. And so the reason I wanted to clarify about the gastroparesis is that since having gastroparesis, I have found out that pizza is kind of like a food that really triggers my symptoms to flare up pretty badly. And so he decided he was going to go get a pizza that night, and by the time he got home, I was feeling slightly better. Not much better, but I wasn't throwing up anymore. And I felt so bad that I felt like I'd been ignoring him, because I'd been so sick. And I just thought, this is our 5-month anniversary. I want to spend some time with him. So we just went and sat on the couch, and I think we watched a movie, and we ate some pizza, and we went to bed. And I don't remember all the details for sure, but I believe during the night I started getting sick again. And he went to work the next day. So the next day was Saturday, and he went to work. But he was, calling me throughout the day, and I kept telling him just how sick I was. I mean, it was worse than it had ever been. Just so sick, and he was really worried. By the time he made it home, I was so sick that he wanted to take me to the hospital, and I felt like I couldn't walk to the car. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't walk to the car. I was still just throwing up, and I couldn't stop. And so he ended up actually calling 911, and they came and got me. Now they took me to the little local hospital, which isn't really much of one. But they were able to start giving me at least some nausea medicine and some fluids, and kind of see what they wanted to do. They went ahead and called my doctor, my specialist in Knoxville, and that doctor recommended that they go ahead and transfer me up to Fort Sanders Hospital in Knoxville. That was his hospital. When we got there, it was pretty late Saturday night. I don't know exactly what time, but it was late, probably like 11 o'clock or something like that. And basically they were gonna do an ultrasound, and then they were just gonna kind of let me rest a little bit and see what happened. So they did the ultrasound, and I couldn't exactly see the screen, but my husband could see it. And he told me later that the technician was looking at the baby, and he said everything looked good. He said the heart rate was still fine, like everything was okay. But my husband said that he could see the baby, and he said the baby was just kind of like jumping around, like moving really quickly, and he felt like the baby was in distress at that point. And he didn't tell me this until afterward. He didn't tell me then. And after they got done with the ultrasound, they were going to move me to a room, and I needed to use the bathroom. So the nurse came, and she got me up, and we walked down to the bathroom. And when I got in the bathroom, I discovered that I was bleeding. And it wasn't a lot at that point, but you know, it was more than spotting. It was bleeding. And you know, I showed it to the nurse, and she kept her composure really well, but I could see concern on her face. You know, I could tell she was worried. And so, you know, they just kind of took me back to the room, and at that point I hadn't thrown up in a long time, and so the kitchen was closed, but they said, we're going to bring you some food and see if you can try to eat something. So they brought me, I think it was like a turkey sandwich or something like that, and I tried a few bites, and it didn't take very long, and it came back up. So they were like, okay, we're not going to try that again. So after that, they got me in a room, and they just kind of settled in and let me rest. I don't remember much about the rest of the weekend. I was there Sunday. You know, my husband was with me all day, but I think I just slept most of the day, and I don't really remember what the doctors came in and said, if they said anything. I really don't have much memory of it. And so I always get confused on the details, but I think we were there Sunday, and I believe we were there Monday. And then during the day Monday, I think I was feeling better. And we kind of started thinking, like, you know, maybe turn the corner, you know, maybe everything's going to be okay. We started, you know, having some hope. And finally they came in, it must have been late in the day on Monday, and they said that they were going to go ahead and do an ultrasound, but they were going to wait and do it Tuesday morning. And now since I was feeling better, my husband had been thinking that he was going to go to work Tuesday morning. And so he started calling like family to see if anybody could come and stay with me. He just didn't want me to be there alone. And we ended up getting one of my sisters and then his cousin's wife. And so the two of them were actually going to come up and be with me on Tuesday, and Steve was going to go to work. Well, then Monday night, as the night sort of went on, I started having a lot of pain. And as soon as I said I was having pain, they had pain medicine for me, like instantly. I guess the doctor must have ordered it already, and they were just waiting for me to say I needed it. And I do kind of regret that they gave me the pain medicine, because it really knocked me out, and I know now that I wasn't thinking clearly, because that night the bleeding also started increasing. And I know at one point I went to the restroom, and there was a lot of blood. And I called the nurse in, and I had enough sense that I called the nurse in and I showed it to her. And she just kind of said, oh, okay. She said, I'll let the doctor know. But then, you know, they just had me get back in bed, and, you know, they had given me this pain medicine, so I went to sleep. When I woke up Tuesday morning, I instantly had this feeling of, I feel great. I felt really good. I didn't feel sick. I didn't have, you know, I had woken up almost every day for the last few months with nausea, and that day I didn't have any. And so I had this thought that they were going to do the ultrasound, and they were going to say everything looks great, and they were going to send me home. And my husband, I don't know if he knew like if he felt that something had happened, but he was going to go to work that morning, and he at the last minute he just decided that he was going to stay until they did the ultrasound. He wanted to see the ultrasound, and then he was going to go on to work. So my sister was there and his cousin's wife was there, and they stayed in the room, and they took me actually over to the doctor's office, which was connected to the hospital. They took me over there. Now I'm diabetic, so they had me hooked up to an insulin drip. And because I was hooked up to that, my nurse had to come along with us and stay in the room with us, because they have to monitor when you're on insulin, you know, just in case your sugar would drop or something like that. So we got to the room that they were going to do the ultrasound, and the technician got ready, and she started, and I was waiting to hear that heartbeat. But there was nothing. There was no sound. And I said, as beautiful as it was to hear that sound the first time, it was excruciating and horrible to not hear it. And I remember, I mean, I knew, not hearing that sound, I knew. And then it seemed like it took forever. And I felt, I mean, it was so strange, because I remember thinking how hard this was, but then my first thought was for that technician and for the nurse that had to be in the room with us, and I felt so bad for them. I kept thinking about them and how difficult it must be, because that technician was the one that had to tell us that the baby was gone. And then at that point I was still in shock, and then she left the room to go get the doctor. She was going to let the doctor know. And after she left the room, we cried a little bit, but not much, because I felt a little self-conscious with the nurse, you know, still being in the room. I wanted to be somewhere alone with my husband so that we could process it. And that just wasn't going to happen right then. So, you know, we cried a little, and the nurse came over and she hugged me and she said she was sorry. I should have brought tissues. And I think maybe the worst part of the whole ordeal was that night, because they wanted me to stay in the hospital another night, but I was on the maternity floor. And I was laying in my bed, and I could hear in the next room a pregnant woman, and she had the monitors hooked up to her baby to hear the baby's heartbeat. And that was so hard. It was so hard to listen to that all night. And those first few days were hard. You know, it just, I don't really know how to explain it unless you've been through it. You don't know what it's like. And the biggest help for me was the other women that came up to me and said, I had a miscarriage. You know, one lady had 4 miscarriages. Some of them had 1, some of them had 2, and at first I thought, I don't want to hear these stories, you know, I don't want to hear about these other sad things that happened, but honestly, it made me feel not so alone. Like, I'm not the only one that's going through this. And that may have been the biggest thing that helped me. And I just want to share a little bit about some of the things we did that I really truly believe did help us heal. Now, obviously, it's been almost 5 years and I still cry about it. But I don't cry every day. You know, and I don't cry every time I think of my baby like I did at first. You know, sometimes there are happy memories. There are good memories. You know, even though it was just a few weeks, there were times that I would talk to my baby when I was carrying him. And I remember some of those times and I think about that, and I didn't want to forget him. I didn't want to pretend that he didn't exist. And so I've got quite a few things around our house that remind me of our baby. The first one is when I found out I was pregnant. We had picked which room we wanted to use as the nursery. And I started trying to decorate it. I wanted to put a tree, like a painted tree, on the wall, but I can't paint. I have no talent for painting. And so I had found some contact paper that was like wood grain, and I took that and I cut out the shape of like a tree trunk with branches, and I cut out little leaves and I stuck those on the wall. And it's really ugly because I had intended it just to be a practice one, and then once I kind of figured out the best way to do it, I was going to do another one that would be like the real tree. But I never got that far, so my very sad, pathetic, ugly little tree is still there. That room now, it's the smallest bedroom in our house, and it's the closest to our bedroom. So that's why we were going to use it as the nursery. And so now I've turned it into like a craft room. I'm still working on getting it set up, and so at some point I will share that with you and let you see what it looks like. But you know, it's really special to me that when I go into that room, I can see that tree, and I can remember how happy I was when I worked on that tree and the plans that we had. And even though we didn't get to carry out all of those plans, it's still a happy thing for me to see that and to remember. And then I know you've seen this piece of artwork that I made behind me. You've seen it in most of my videos. What you don't see is that I made each of the little petals out of a different scrapbook paper. And the round one in the very center is a piece that says family. And then the very first row of petals, those ones are made out of papers that had different family member titles on. So some of them say father or daddy, some of them say mother or mommy, and then there's some that says baby. And so when I was making that, I wanted it to kind of be a representation that we are a family, even though we're not physically together. And that baby is part of our family, even though he's not here. Now, one thing that we did is, you know, I was about 11 weeks when we lost the baby. So we don't know if it was a boy or a girl. But we decided that one thing that would help us to sort of process our grief would be to name the baby. And so we decided that we would just kind of pick a gender for our baby, since we didn't know. And it had kind of been a running joke with us that, of course, I thought it was going to be a girl and my husband thought it was going to be a boy. And so I felt like for him that I wanted it to be a boy. And so we decided that that was our son. We actually have a couple of different names that we refer to him by. We started out calling him Peanut because, of course, on the ultrasound picture he just, looked like a little peanut. But then when we thought about like giving him an actual name, we decided that he would have been Steve Jr. And so I usually refer to him as SJ or just Junior when we talk about him. And I think that really helps because instead of just saying the baby, to give him a name and to be able to say, do you remember when we were pregnant with Junior? Instead of saying, do you remember the baby that we miscarried? It makes it easier to talk about him, and I want to talk about him. I don't want him to be forgotten. And this past Mother's Day at church, I had 2 women that came up to me and gave me a hug and told me Happy Mother's Day. And just reminded me that I am a mother, even though I don't have my baby with me. And that was really important for me. They might not know how much it meant to me, but it really did to have his existence acknowledged, that he really was here and that he really is part of me. And then I wanted to have something that I could always have with me that would remind me of him. Now, I don't necessarily wear it every day, and in fact right now it's kind of, I don't know if you call that oxidized, but it's starting to kind of turn black. And I've tried cleaning it with jewelry cleaners and stuff and I can't get it off, but even if it's black, I'm gonna wear it anyway. And it's this little heart, and there's a cutout piece that's heart-shaped that's missing, and it says, a piece of my heart is in heaven. And my sister bought that for me, and it's just one more thing that makes him seem more tangible. It's something I can touch, something I can hold, that reminds me of him. And I really don't know what else to say. I'm sorry, this is probably going to be really long, but I felt like it was important to share what we went through. And just because typically this question does come up once we talk about our miscarriage, and that is, are you going to have any more children? And the answer to that is no. And that is basically because of all of my health conditions that we have now found out that I have. We have been advised that it just would not be wise for us to try to carry a baby, because it most likely would be not safe for the baby, but also would be not safe for me, when there are other ways. And that's what we're planning to do. Is we're planning that someday we can adopt, and hopefully we can adopt a few children, or maybe a lot of children, maybe 12 children, maybe 22. I don't know what God's plan is for us, but I know He has one. And so I really hope that if this is something that you've struggled with, or maybe you are struggling with, maybe you're looking for other people that have gone through the same thing that you have, and I'm here. I've done it, and it does make it harder knowing that we lost a baby and there won't be another one. There won't be another one that I carry. Some days that makes it really hard, but I do know that we can build our family in other ways. So I'm not hopeless, because the doctors advised us not to try to get pregnant. That doesn't make me hopeless that I'm never gonna have children in my home. And I just want to share that with you. And just remember that when you're going through something difficult, something that's just absolutely you feel like it's life-shattering, just remember that God is there, that He knows everything we go through. He gave up His Son. He saw His Son be tortured and beaten and die on a cross for us, for us who don't deserve it. So if anyone understands what it's like to lose a child, God does. And you can call on Him. You can turn to Him for any help that you need, and He will be there for you. So if you've watched the entire video, thank you for watching. I know it's probably long, and I'm sorry for that, but I just felt like there was a lot that I had to share. And so I hope that you'll come back. I hope that you'll subscribe. And subscribing is free. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't pay anything. I don't get any money from it. But I want to build a community where we can talk about things. We can talk about illnesses. We can talk about death. We can talk about difficult things that people struggle with, and hopefully I can give you some help. And so I just want to thank you for being part of this. And if you have a miscarriage story, if you want to share your story in the comments, just realize that if you share your story, it could help someone else. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.